"You will not weep, you will not resist, and you will not shame this family," her mother said, pinning the veil with fingers that did not tremble. "You will go to the Duke of Kingscote, and you will do your duty, and whatever the knight asks of you, Alina, you will simply endure it. Women have endured worse for far less than a duchess's coronet." Alina Pruitt stood before the glass in her wedding white and understood, at last and completely, that no one was going to save her. The Duke of Kingscote did not know any of this. He knew only that he was to be married within the hour to a young woman he had met exactly 3 times, each occasion stiffer than the last, and that the arrangement had been made between his late father's will and her father's debts in a manner that left neither of them any choice in it. Gideon, Duke of Kingscote, stood at the altar of the chapel at Kingscote Hall and watched the doors, and felt, beneath the calm he had worn all his life like armor, a disquiet he could not name. He had seen how she looked at him, 3 times and 3 times the same, that particular stillness that a man mistakes if he is careless for coldness and recognizes if he is not for fear. Gideon was not a careless man. He knew what he looked like to the world. A large, dark, silent duke with a dead father's title too heavy on his shoulders and a face that did not easily smile. He knew what the county said of him, that he was proud, that he was hard, that his first betrothed years ago had cried off and no one had blamed her. He had let them say it. It was easier than the truth, which was that Gideon Kingscote had never in his life known how to make himself understood and had long since stopped trying. But he did not want a frightened wife. The thought had kept him awake. He did not want to stand at this altar and watch a girl walk toward him as though toward a scaffold. The doors opened. Alina came in on her father's arm. She was pale as the veil that hid her, and she walked the length of the chapel with her eyes fixed on the middle distance and her chin held with such deliberate steadiness that Gideon knew, at once, exactly what it cost her. He had held his own face that way at his father's funeral. He recognized the labor of it, and something in his chest, which he had thought long since gone quiet, turned over. She reached him. He looked down at her. Through the veil he could just see her eyes, wide and dark and braced. "Miss Pruitt," he said low, meant only for her, "you are trembling." "I am cold, your grace," she said. It was a lie and they both knew it, and he did not press her, because a man does not correct a woman's dignity in front of a chapel full of witnesses. The words were said. The ring was given. Gideon lifted her veil with hands he kept as gentle as he knew how, and Alina looked up at him for the space of a breath, and he saw not coldness, not pride, but a girl who had been told to endure him, looking at the man she must endure. It broke something open in him quietly, where no one could see. The wedding breakfast was long and loud, and Alina spoke perhaps a dozen words the whole of it. Gideon watched her mother lean close and murmur to her more than once, watched the girl's spine go straighter each time, watched her eat almost nothing. He watched, too, the way the guests looked at him, the sidelong glances, the small satisfied cruelty of people who believed they were witnessing a sacrifice and found it delicious. He had lived among such people all his life. He had never before wanted so badly to take one of them by the collar. He did nothing. He was, above all things, a controlled man. But he began, over the course of that long, bright afternoon, to make a plan. Night came to Kingscote Hall. The guests departed. The great house emptied of everyone but its servants and its master and its new mistress, and Alina was brought at last to the door of the Duchess's chamber by a maid who would not meet her eyes. She stood in the middle of the vast fire-lit room in her nightgown with her hair unbound down her back, and she waited, and she thought about her mother's words, and she resolved that she would not weep. She would endure. She had promised, whatever the knight asked of her. The door opened. Gideon came in. He was still dressed. That was the first thing she noticed. Through the haze of her terror, he had not undressed. He wore his shirt and breeches, his coat gone but his cravat only loosened, and he shut the door quietly behind him and did not come toward her. He crossed instead to the 2 chairs by the fire and stood by one of them, one hand resting on its back. "Will you sit?" he said. I would like to talk to you, only that." Alina did not move. She was too frightened to trust the words. "Your Grace." "Gideon?" He said his own name almost awkwardly, as though it were a coat he was not used to wearing. "If you can bear to, my name is Gideon. No one has called me by it in a very long while." He gestured to the chair. "Please sit down. You are swaying on your feet, and I have no wish to catch a fainting wife on our first evening. It would set an alarming precedent." There was, impossibly, a dry gentleness in it. Alina found herself sitting. She perched on the very edge of the chair, her hands knotted in her lap, and Gideon lowered himself into the one opposite, keeping the whole width of the hearth between them. For a moment he said nothing at all. He looked into the fire, and the light moved over his hard, dark face, and when he spoke to the flames rather than to her, as though it were easier. "I know how this marriage was made," he said. "I know you had no more choice in it than I did less, I think. For a man in my position has at least the power to refuse, and I did not use it, and I have been ashamed of that all day. I let my father's will and your father's debts decide it, because deciding for myself has never come easily to me, and I told myself it was only a contract, only lands and money, the way such things are always done." He turned his head and looked at her at last. "And then you walked up the aisle looking as though you were walking to your own hanging, and I understood what the contract had actually purchased. It had purchased your fear, and I find I cannot spend it." Alina stared at him. Her carefully held face had begun, without her permission, to come apart. "My mother told me to endure you," she said. The words fell out of her, unplanned, reckless. "She said whatever the night asked, I was to endure it and not to weep and not to shame the family. I have been telling myself all day that I could. That women have borne worse." Her voice cracked. "I did not think a duke would want, I did not think there would be talking." Something crossed Gideon's face that she had not seen there before, a flinch, quickly mastered, the look of a man who has just understood exactly how the day had felt from the other side of it. "Endure me," he repeated softly. "God, is that what she said?" He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and his voice dropped lower still. "Alina, listen to me, because I am not a clever man with words, and I may only manage this once. I do not want a wife who endures me. I would rather have no wife at all. I have been married a single day, and already the thought that you lay awake bracing yourself against me is the worst thing I have carried in years, and I have carried a good many." He drew a breath. "I will not touch you tonight. I will not touch you tomorrow, nor the night after, nor any night at all until you can look at me across a room without that stillness in you that I have mistaken twice now for coldness and know now for fear. If that is never, then it is never, and you will still be my duchess, and this house will still be yours, and no one, least of all your mother, will ever know the difference. That is my wedding gift to you. Not endurance. Time." The fire cracked in the grate. Alina was weeping now, quietly, the tears simply running, the great held breath of the whole day finally let go, and she was not ashamed, because for the first time since the veil was pinned she was not afraid. "You would do that," she whispered. "You would let it be never." "I would," he said, "though I will tell you honestly, because I think we had better begin with honesty or not begin at all, that I do not believe it will be never. I sat at that breakfast today and watched you say 12 words and eat nothing and hold your head up while a room full of vultures enjoyed your misery, and I thought, there is more courage in that girl than in every man I fought beside in my regiment. I do not think you are a woman who was made to endure things forever. I think you are a woman who has never once been given the choice to want something, and I should like very much, and very slowly, and with no claim upon you whatever, to be the first thing you are ever allowed to choose." Alina looked at him for a long time across the width of the hearth. At the large, dark, silent man the whole county called hard and proud, who had come to his own wedding night and asked only to talk, who had heard the word endure and looked as though it had wounded him, who was offering her, of all impossible things, time. "Then may I ask you something?" she said. "Husband," and the word came out steadier than she expected. "Anything." "Why does the county say you are cold?" Gideon was quiet. Then slowly the corner of his hard mouth moved, not quite a smile, but the country from which a smile might one day come. Because I have never known how to be otherwise where anyone could see, he said. My father was a hard man and taught me that softness was weakness, and I learned the lesson too well, and by the time I understood it was a lie I had already frightened away everyone who might have unlearned it in me. I stopped trying to be understood a long while ago. It seemed less painful. He looked at her and the fire warmed the gravity of his face. I did not expect to be married to someone I wished to be understood by. It is a novel and rather terrifying sensation. You will have to be patient with me, I think, as I mean to be patient with you. We are neither of us, I suspect, much practiced at being wanted. And Alina, who had walked up the aisle that morning toward what she believed was the end of her life, felt something bloom in her chest that she had not felt in longer than she could remember, and knew it, after a moment, for hope. She did not go to him that night, and he did not come to her. He rose after a time and banked the fire so that she would be warm, and bade her good night at the door with a bow so grave and so gentle that she nearly called him back, and did not, only because she was learning already that some things are the sweeter for being chosen slowly. The days that followed were unlike anything Alina had imagined a marriage could be. Gideon kept his word absolutely. He asked nothing. He gave instead his time, his attention, the slow, careful gift of himself, offered without any claim. He showed her the library and found she read as hungrily as he did, and they fell into the habit of reading whole evenings by the same fire, passing pages, arguing gently over them. He put a mare of her own in the Kingscote stables and taught her the far rides of the estate, and watched her come alive in the open air, the held stillness dropping from her a little more each week. He learned that she laughed when she was easy with her whole face, and he found himself arranging the days to earn that laugh, and catching himself at it and not minding. He fell in love with his wife the way a stone wears smooth under water, so gradually that he could not have named the day, only that at some point he woke and knew that if she left him now the great house would be unbearable, and that he would rather be hard and feared for the rest of his life by everyone in England than lose the one person who had ever called him Gideon and meant it kindly. And Alina, for her part, found the fear leaving her by degrees she could measure, until one evening in the deep of the winter, after they had read late and the fire had burned low, she did not rise to go to her own chamber. She stayed. She looked at her husband across the small, warm space between them, the large, dark man who had asked only to talk on their wedding night and had kept every promise since, and she found that the stillness in her was gone entirely, and in its place was something she had chosen, freely, wholly her own. "Gideon," she said. He looked up from the fire. Whatever was in her face, he read it, for he had learned to read her better than he had ever learned to read anyone. He went very still, not the stillness of fear, but of a man afraid to hope too fast. "You need not," he said quietly. "You know that. Nothing has changed that I do not wish to press." "I know." She rose and crossed the small distance and stood before his chair and put her hand steady, unhurried, entirely her own against his cheek. "That is precisely why. You gave me the choice, husband. I have thought about it a very long while." Her voice did not tremble at all. "And I choose you." Gideon closed his eyes at her touch as though it were something he had waited his whole life to be given. Then he took her hand from his face and pressed his mouth to the palm of it, and rose, and drew her gently into the circle of his arms, and the fire burned low and lower in the grate. They were, from that night, entirely happy as two people can be who came together in dread, and built, out of patience and honesty and time, a thing far stronger than any contract. Alina's mother came to visit in the spring and found her daughter transformed, glowing, mistress of a great house and unmistakably beloved, and could not for the life of her understand it, for she had raised the girl to endure and could not see how endurance had turned to this. "However did you bear it?" her mother asked in a rare private moment. "The Duke, they say he is so hard a man." Alina looked across the room to where Gideon stood, and he caught her eye, and the smile he gave her, the one the county never saw, the one that had taken a whole winter to teach him, was answer enough. "I did not bear him, Mamma," she said gently. "I chose him. It is a very different thing. I only wish someone had told me sooner that I was allowed.